My name is Alex Brooks. I'm 34, living in Chicago, and working as a financial investigations manager for a big firm. My life has always been pretty routine. Busy weekdays, quiet weekends, and the occasional beer with friends. I thought I had it all figured out. A stable job, a nice home, and my wife, Rachel, who I've been married to for 5 years. She's beautiful, smart, and outgoing. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we were solid. At least I did until a few days ago. It was a warm Saturday afternoon. One of those perfect summer days where you can smell the grass and feel the sun on your skin. I decided to mow the lawn while Rachel was inside catching up on work, or so I thought. The task wasn't particularly exciting, but it gave me a sense of satisfaction to see the yard neat and trimmed. I finished up, wiped the sweat from my face, and headed back inside for a cold drink. As I walked up the stairs to the kitchen, I heard Rachel talking on the phone. She was in the dining room, her voice low but clear enough for me to hear through the open door. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but a few words stopped me dead in my tracks. I don't know, it's been 6 months. It wasn't supposed to get this far, she said. There was a pause, and I could hear her friend's muffled voice on the other end. Rachel sighed. It's just flirting. It's not like it means anything. Besides, I'm ending it. Alex and I decided to start trying for a baby, and I need to focus on that. My stomach dropped. 6 months. Flirting. Ending it. My mind raced as I pieced together what she was saying. Rachel was talking about another man, and not just any man, her boss, Richard. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding so hard I thought she might hear it. I didn't know what to do. Should I burst in and confront her? Should I wait until she got off the phone? Part of me didn't want to believe it, like maybe I had misheard or misunderstood. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. I stood there, frozen, listening as Rachel continued. I know. It was stupid. But he's charming, and we work so closely together. It just kind of happened. But it's over now. I'm going to tell him Monday that we need to keep things professional. Her tone was so casual, like she was talking about returning a pair of shoes she didn't like. Couldn't wrap my head around it. This was my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, admitting to an affair like it was no big deal. I don't even remember walking away. But somehow I ended up in the garage, sitting on a folding chair with my head in my hands. My mind was spinning. How could she do this to me? To us? And then there was the part about having a baby. We talked about it for months, weighing the pros and cons, and finally decided we were ready. Or at least I thought we were. Now I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I stayed out there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. When I finally went back inside, Rachel was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner like nothing had happened. She looked up and smiled at me. Hey, you're all sweaty. Go take a shower before dinner. I nodded, unable to say anything. My throat felt tight, and I knew if I tried to speak, my voice would crack. I walked past her and went straight to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. As the water poured over me, I tried to figure out what to do next. Should I confront her right away? Should I wait and gather more information? I felt betrayed, angry, and utterly confused. Part of me wanted to believe her when she said it was just flirting, but the other part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I haven't said anything to her yet. That was 3 days ago, and I've been walking around in a daze ever since. Every time I look at her, I see a stranger. I've been combing through our past conversations, our texts, even her behavior, trying to find clues I might have missed. How long has she been lying to me? And if she's capable of this, what else is she hiding? I don't know what to do. Do I confront her now? Or do I wait and see if she comes clean? Can I even trust her again? All I know is the life I thought I had is gone, and I'm not sure how to move forward. If anyone has advice, I'm all ears. The days after I overheard Rachel's conversation were some of the longest and most miserable of my life. I couldn't concentrate on anything. My mind kept looping through the same questions. How could this have happened? Was it my fault? And most importantly, what the hell was I supposed to do now? Rachel and I had been together for 12 years, 7 of those as husband and wife. We met in college. She was the outgoing one who lit up every room, and I was the quieter guy who somehow managed to catch her attention. I thought we were the perfect couple. I really did. We had our arguments like anyone else, but we always seemed to work through them. Or so I thought. Now everything felt like a lie. I kept replaying her words in my head. It wasn't supposed to get this far. What did that even mean? How far had it gone? She said it was just flirting, but 6 months? That's not a slip-up. That's a relationship. And then there was her plan to end it because we were going to try for a baby. Was I just plan B for her? I couldn't confront her. Not yet. As much as I wanted to demand answers, I knew that without proof, it would just be my word against hers. Rachel was good with words, charming and persuasive. She could easily turn the conversation around and make me doubt myself. I needed to be sure. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I felt like I was in a scene from some terrible soap opera. Rachel was laughing about something one of her coworkers said, completely oblivious to the fact that I was dying inside. I forced myself to smile and nod, playing the part of the clueless husband. But inside I was a mess. I started thinking about how I could get more information. My first thought was to check her phone, but Rachel was always careful about it. She kept it on her at all times, even bringing it to the bathroom when she showered. That alone should have been a red flag, but I never thought much of it before. Now it seemed like a neon sign flashing in my face. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention to her behavior. She didn't seem guilty or nervous, just her usual self. That almost made it worse. How could she act so normal after what she'd done? Did it mean she didn't care? Or was she just that good at hiding things? One night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room with my laptop, trying to figure out my next move. I Googled things like, how to confront a cheating spouse, and signs your wife is lying. It was pathetic, really, but I didn't know what else to do. Every article said the same thing. Gather evidence before you confront them. So that's what I decided to do. I wasn't sure how yet, but I knew I couldn't go into this blind. I needed to know the truth, the whole truth, before I could even think about what to do next. The worst part was the doubt creeping into my mind. What if I was wrong? What if I misheard her or misunderstood? I kept replaying that conversation, trying to convince myself that there might be an innocent explanation. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that my wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, had betrayed me. For now, I'm biding my time. Rachel doesn't suspect a thing, and I plan to keep it that way. But the thought of living like this, with all these unanswered questions, is eating me alive. A few days after overhearing Rachel's phone call, things took an unexpected turn. She casually mentioned over dinner that her boss, Richard, was throwing a party at his estate and wanted us both to attend. I froze for a moment, trying to keep my expression neutral. The idea of going to Richard's house, knowing what I knew or suspected, made my stomach churn. But if I refused, Rachel would notice something was off, and I couldn't afford that. So, I plastered on a smile and said, "Sure, sounds fun." The day of the party, Rachel was in a great mood. She spent hours getting ready, humming to herself as she did her hair and makeup. Watching her, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. She looked so happy, so carefree, while I was drowning in doubt and betrayal. The drive to Richard's house took about an hour. His place was in one of those upscale suburbs that practically scream, "I'm rich and I want everyone to know it." As we pulled into the long, tree-lined driveway, I couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness. The estate was massive, pristine gardens, a fountain out front, and a house that looked more like a mansion. Rachel seemed impressed. "Wow, this is incredible," she said, her eyes wide as she looked around. "Yeah, it's something," I muttered, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. Inside, the place was just as extravagant: crystal chandeliers, expensive artwork, and a ridiculous amount of marble. The guests were a mix of lawyers, judges, and other people who clearly moved in very different circles than I did. And then there was Richard. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and a confident smile that bordered on smug. The kind of guy who always seemed to be the center of attention. As soon as he saw us, he came over with a drink in hand. "Alex, right? Good to meet you," he said. shaking my hand with a little too much enthusiasm. "Nice to meet you, too," I replied, forcing a polite smile. His attention quickly shifted to Rachel. "And Rachel as stunning as ever," he said, giving her a look that made my blood boil. Rachel laughed, brushing it off like it was nothing. But I saw the way she smiled at him, the way her eyes lit up. It wasn't nothing. For the next hour, I played the role of the polite, supportive husband while Richard openly flirted with my wife. He complimented her dress, her laugh, even her work ethic. Like I was supposed to be impressed by his ability to notice everything about her. I was fuming inside, but I kept it together. This wasn't the time or place to cause a scene. At one point, I stepped outside to get some air. I needed a break from the fake smiles and forced small talk. That's when I met Selena, Richard's daughter. She looked to be in her early 20s, with dark hair and a sharp, confident demeanor that reminded me of her father. She was sitting on a lounge chair, scrolling through her phone, but she glanced up when she saw me. "You're Rachel's husband, right?" she asked, her tone casual but curious. "Yeah, that's me," I said, leaning against the railing. "Alex, I'm Selena," she said, standing up and offering her hand. I shook it, unsure of where this was going. We made some small talk about the party and how over-the-top the house was. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "You know, my dad has a habit of getting too close to his employees." I froze, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" She gave me a pointed look. "I think you know what I mean." I didn't know what to say. Was she implying what I thought she was? Selena shrugged, as if the conversation wasn't a big deal. "Look, it's none of my business, but you seem like a decent guy, so just keep your eyes open, okay?" With that, she walked back inside, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She knew. She had to know. And if Richard's own daughter was hinting at this, then it was worse than I thought. I spent the rest of the party in a daze, barely listening to conversations and avoiding Rachel as much as possible. On the drive home, she chatted about how nice the party was and how much she admired Richard's success. I nodded along, barely responding, my mind racing with everything Selena had said. If there had been any part of me still clinging to the hope that Rachel's affair was just a misunderstanding, it was gone now. The evidence was piling up, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The day after the party, I was still trying to process everything when something completely unexpected happened. Around lunchtime, my office assistant poked her head into my office and said, "There's someone here to see you. A Selena, she wouldn't give me a last name." I froze for a moment before telling her to let Selena in. A minute later, Richard's daughter walked into my office, looking calm and composed as if this was a perfectly normal visit. "Alex," she said, shutting the door behind her. "We need to talk." I gestured for her to sit, unsure of what to expect. My mind was racing. Why was she here? What did she want from me? She sat down, crossing her legs and fixing me with a steady gaze. "I'll cut to the chase. I know my father is having an affair with your wife." I blinked, stunned by how blunt she was. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've hated my father for as long as I can remember," she said, her tone ice cold. "He's a liar and a manipulator. He cheated on my mom constantly while she was alive, and I'm convinced that stress contributed to her cancer." Her voice wavered slightly at the mention of her mother, but she quickly composed herself. "I've been waiting for an opportunity to take him down, and this might be it." I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what she was saying. "You want to take him down? Why? What do you get out of this?" Her expression hardened. "Closure, revenge, call it whatever you want. I've spent years watching him destroy people's lives without facing any consequences. It's time someone stood up to him." I didn't know what to say. The idea of teaming up with Selena, of all people, felt surreal. But then she pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "I have proof," she said, placing the phone on my desk and tapping the screen. What she showed me made my blood run cold. There were photos and videos of Richard meeting with Rachel, private lunches, late-night encounters, even a clip of them at a hotel. It was undeniable. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Seeing it was so much worse than hearing about it. My hands shook as I scrolled through the evidence. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I want you to help me," Selena said. "This isn't just about the affair. My father is involved in a lot of shady things, corruption, bribery, using his position as district attorney to benefit himself and his friends. I've been gathering evidence for months, but I need someone on the inside to help me put the pieces together." "You think I'm the right person for that?" I asked, incredulous. "I think you have a vested interest in seeing him go down," she said, giving me a pointed look. "And I think you're smart enough to know that going after him directly won't work. He's powerful, and he knows how to cover his tracks. But if we work together, we might have a chance." I hesitated, torn between anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of hope. On one hand, I wanted nothing more than to confront Rachel and demand answers. On the other hand, Selena was offering me a chance to do something bigger, to expose Richard and hold him accountable for everything he'd done. "What's your plan?" I asked finally. She smiled, a sharp, calculating smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "First, we gather as much evidence as we can. Not just of the affair, but of his corruption. Then we take it to the right people, someone who can't be bought or intimidated. It won't be easy, but if we play our cards right, we can bring him down." I nodded slowly, still trying to wrap my head around the situation. "And Rachel?" Selena's smile faded. "That's up to you. But if you want my advice, don't let her know what you're doing. Not yet. We need to keep this quiet until we're ready to act." I agreed, though it felt like a betrayal in itself to keep this from Rachel. But then I reminded myself that she had already betrayed me. She wasn't the person I thought she was, and I couldn't trust her. Not now, maybe not ever. By the time Selena left my office, we had a tentative plan in place. I didn't know if it would work or if I was making a huge mistake. But for the first time in days, I felt like I was doing something. As I watched Selena walk away, I couldn't help but marvel at the strange twist my life had taken. A week ago, I thought I was just a regular guy with a happy marriage and a stable life. Now, I was teaming up with my wife's lover's daughter to take him down. If nothing else, it was going to be one hell of a story. The following week was a whirlwind. Selena and I dove headfirst into the investigation, and I used every skill I'd honed as a financial analyst to track Richard's accounts. It was surreal, really, sifting through bank statements and transaction histories to uncover the dirt on the man who had wrecked my marriage and, apparently, countless other lives. Selena wasn't kidding when she said her father was involved in shady dealings. He had layers upon layers of shell companies, offshore accounts, and false names designed to obscure the true flow of his money. At first glance, his finances looked squeaky clean, but with enough digging, patterns started to emerge. Within a few days, we discovered that Richard had laundered over $4 million through offshore accounts. The money came from supposed donors who contributed to his campaign and charitable initiatives. But it didn't take long to figure out that these donors weren't who they claimed to be. The funds were actually coming from individuals and organizations who had received favorable treatment from Richard. Some were business owners who'd managed to dodge regulatory hurdles. Others were individuals who had had criminal charges mysteriously dropped. Richard was selling favors, justice for a price, and using his position as a district attorney to make it happen. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. We uncovered expense reports that showed campaign funds being diverted to suspicious payments. Selena recognized the names of some of the recipients as women her father had been involved with. He was using campaign money to pay for their silence, covering up affairs, paying for trips, and, in some cases, handing over lump sums of cash to keep them quiet. I couldn't believe the scale of it. It was like peeling back the layers of a rotten onion. Every new discovery was worse than the last. The man wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal, plain and simple. Selena handled the emotional side of things far better than I expected. I figured that digging into her father's corruption would stir up old wounds, but she seemed almost detached. Maybe she'd spent so many years resenting him that this felt more like justice than betrayal. "This isn't even scratching the surface," she said one evening as we sat in my office, reviewing documents. "I know there's more out there. He's been doing this for years. He's gotten too comfortable, too cocky. That's how we'll catch him. Her determination was infectious, but I couldn't help feeling a pang of bitterness. All of this, the lies, the affairs, the corruption, it made me question everything. How could Rachel have fallen for a man like this? Did she even know the kind of person he really was? Or did she just not care? Selena and I decided to keep a low profile as we gathered evidence. We couldn't afford to tip Richard off. I spent long nights at the office, poring over data and connecting the dots. It wasn't just about exposing him anymore. It was personal. When we finally had a comprehensive picture of Richard's activities, Selena looked over the files and gave a low whistle. "This is enough to ruin him," she said, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. But we both knew we had to be careful. Richard was powerful and he had friends in high places. If we went after him the wrong way, he'd find a way to bury us, figuratively or literally. Our next step was figuring out who we could trust with the evidence. Someone who couldn't be bought, intimidated, or manipulated. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was making progress. As I looked at the mountain of evidence we'd collected, I couldn't help but think about Rachel. She was part of this mess, whether she knew it or not. And sooner or later, I'd have to confront her. But for now, my focus was on Richard. The man had built his empire on lies, and it was about to come crashing down. The day everything came crashing down for Richard was one I'll never forget. After weeks of careful planning, Selena and I handed all the evidence over to the FBI. Every offshore account, every fabricated donor, every dollar funneled into hush money was laid out in excruciating detail. There was no way he could worm his way out of this. It didn't take long for the wheels of justice to start turning. Richard had gotten away with his schemes for years, but his overconfidence had finally caught up to him. The FBI coordinated his arrest for maximum impact. They didn't just take him quietly. They walked into his office in the middle of the workday, slapped cuffs on him, and escorted him out in front of his entire staff. The news hit like a bomb. Richard wasn't just a prominent district attorney. He was a rising star in politics and a frontrunner for the Senate. His arrest sent shockwaves through the legal and political communities. Every major news outlet covered the story, splashing his face across the screen along with the list of charges: corruption, bribery, money laundering, misuse of campaign funds. Watching the coverage, I felt an overwhelming sense of vindication. The man who had destroyed so many lives, including mine, was finally facing the consequences of his actions. But the victory was bittersweet. I couldn't celebrate too much, knowing how deeply Rachel had been involved with him. Speaking of Rachel, the fallout from Richard's arrest hit her hard. She tried to act like it was business as usual for a few days, but it was obvious she was rattled. The strain showed in her face, in the way she jumped whenever her phone buzzed. I kept my distance, letting her stew in the mess she'd helped create. A week after the arrest, I decided it was time to confront her. I came home from work, sat her down at the dining room table, and laid it all out. "I know about the affair," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I've known for weeks." Rachel's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I heard you on the phone," I continued, "and I've seen the evidence. I know everything." She finally managed to stammer out, "Alex, I'm sorry. I didn't mean." I held up a hand to stop her. Don't insult me by pretending it didn't mean anything. You betrayed me, Rachel. For 6 months, you lied to my face and made me think we had a future. Do you know how humiliating that is?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I know I messed up. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Alex, please, just give me a chance." I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm. "There's no fixing this. I'm filing for divorce. I already have the papers drawn up." Her eyes widened in shock. "Divorce? You're not even going to try to work through this." "Work through what? The fact that you slept with your boss while planning to have a baby with me? You made your choice, Rachel. Now I'm making mine." She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by anger. She had destroyed our marriage, and no amount of tears could change that. The next week, Rachel signed the divorce papers without a fight. I think she knew there was no point in dragging it out. She packed her things and moved to another state, saying she wanted a fresh start. I didn't ask where she was going, and honestly, I didn't care. As for me, I'm still picking up the pieces of my life. The divorce was painful, but it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I've started going to therapy, trying to make sense of everything and figure out how to move forward. Selena and I stayed in touch for a while after Richard's arrest. She seemed relieved to finally see her father face justice, but I could tell it took a toll on her. She decided to leave the area too, wanting to put as much distance as possible between herself and the wreckage of her family. In the end, I learned some hard truths about trust, betrayal, and resilience. My marriage is over, and my life looks nothing like it did a few months ago. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm on solid ground. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that sometimes you have to let go of the people who hurt you, even if it feels like losing everything. Because in the end, the only way to move forward is to leave the past behind. Life after Richard's arrest felt like stepping into a completely different reality. The scandal was all anyone could talk about, and for weeks, my phone buzzed non-stop with updates and questions from colleagues. But as the dust started to settle, I found myself in a strange position. I was no longer just the guy quietly doing his job. I was the guy who had helped expose one of the biggest corruption scandals in years. My work didn't go unnoticed. A month after everything went public, I was called into a meeting with the executive board. They praised my skills, my discretion, and my ability to untangle a financial web that most people wouldn't dare touch. By the end of the meeting, they offered me a promotion, head of a newly formed financial investigation unit tasked with handling high-profile cases like Richard's. It was a huge step up, not just in title and salary, but in responsibility. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of purpose again. I threw myself into the work, eager to rebuild my life and prove to myself that I was more than the man who'd been betrayed and blindsided. Around the same time, Selena reached out. She'd decided to move to Chicago to start fresh. She told me she wanted to finish her degree and put some distance between herself and the wreckage of her father's legacy. We met for coffee one day, and I could tell right away that the Selena sitting across from me was different from the sharp, determined woman who had stormed into my office a few months ago. She looked lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "I'm trying to focus on the future," she said, stirring her latte. "No more looking back. I think we both deserve that." She was right. We had both been dragged through the mud, and though our experiences were different, they had left us with the same goal: to move forward. Over the next few months, Selena and I became good friends. She was my sounding board during the chaos of my divorce, and I helped her navigate the challenges of rebuilding her life in a new city. We didn't talk about Richard much. There wasn't much left to say, but we did share a sense of satisfaction in knowing he was facing the consequences of his actions. One day, after a particularly grueling week at work, Selena invited me to grab dinner. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I found myself laughing. Not the forced, polite kind, but the genuine kind that makes your chest ache in the best way. "You know," she said as we walked out of the restaurant, "I didn't think I'd ever find someone I could trust after everything with my dad, but you've proven me wrong." Her words stuck with me. I realized then that Selena had become more than just an ally in taking Richard down. She had become a true friend, someone who had helped me through one of the darkest periods of my life. I'm still figuring things out, what I want, where I'm going, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. My career is thriving. I have people I can trust in my corner, and I'm finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, but sometimes those unexpected twists lead to new opportunities and connections you never saw coming. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for now, I'm ready to face it head-on. As the months rolled on, the chaos that had consumed my life finally began to settle. My divorce was finalized, and though the end of my marriage to Rachel was painful, it also came with an unexpected sense of relief. The weight of betrayal and doubt that had hung over me for so long was finally gone. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free to focus on my career, free to rebuild my life, and free to pursue the things that truly mattered to me. The promotion to head of the Financial Investigation Unit gave me a renewed sense of purpose, and I threw myself into the work with everything I had. Exposing corruption and holding powerful people accountable became more than just a job. It was my way of reclaiming control over a life that had felt completely out of my hands. During this time, Selena and I grew closer. What started as an alliance born out of mutual pain and a shared goal evolved into something deeper. She became my confidant, my partner in crime, in the figurative sense, of course, and the person I turned to when things felt overwhelming. We started spending more time together outside of work and our efforts to expose Richard. Selena had a sharp wit and a dry sense of humor that could pull me out of even the darkest moods. She was also fiercely independent and determined to carve out her own path, which I admired. One weekend, she suggested we take a break from everything and travel. "You need a reset," she said. "We both do." We booked a last-minute trip to Colorado, where we hiked through breathtaking landscapes and stayed in a cozy cabin tucked away in the mountains. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. Sitting by a crackling fire one night, Selena turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought I'd find someone who understood what I've been through. But you do." Her words hit me in a way I didn't expect. Over the past few months, Selena had gone from being a stranger to my most trusted friend. And somewhere along the way, my feelings for her had shifted into something more. I hesitated, unsure of whether to say anything. But before I could overthink it, she leaned closer, her expression soft and uncertain. "Alex, I think we're more than friends. Aren't we?" I nodded, unable to deny what had become so obvious. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think we are." From that moment on, things between us changed. We were no longer just two people bound by shared pain and a quest for justice. We were partners in every sense of the word. Our relationship grew slowly and naturally, built on a foundation of trust and understanding that neither of us had experienced before. We continued to travel, work together, and dream about the future. Selena went back to school to finish her degree, and I supported her every step of the way. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much my life has changed. A year ago, I was a man trapped in a failing marriage, blind to the truth and unsure of my own worth. Now, I'm starting a new chapter with someone who sees me for who I am and stands beside me as an equal. Selena and I aren't rushing into anything, but we've talked about the future, about building a life together. It feels strange, in a way, to think about love after everything I went through with Rachel. But with Selena, it's different. There's no pretense, no deception, just honesty and a shared desire to move forward. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, but sometimes those unexpected twists lead to something better than you ever could have imagined. I'm not sure where this journey will take me, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out.